Actually, the White House.
You want the mic?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it probably
All right.
does.
You gotta talk
Well, for those of you who don't know, the reason I got into this was about a month and a half ago. Abruptly, it was announced that Newport Elementary was closing. You know, as the only member of the city council that has kids in the school district down at Newport Elementary, people started to turn to us and turn to me. And I kind of got into fighting the largest referendum in state history now. So that's sometimes how you don't always look out to pick a fight, but one times when it comes at you, you have to do that fight. Thank you. So what we have on August 9th is a question that will come to the voters. Shall the board of the Independent School District number 833 South Washington County Schools, Minnesota, be authorized to issue general obligation building bonds in the amount not to exceed $462,666,000 for the acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities, including but not limited to construction of 2 elementary schools, expansion of 3 high schools, improvement of facilities district-wide, and land acquisition. So that's the question that people will have to stare at and come to a yes or no vote on. For those who aren't familiar, this is the largest referendum in state history by a significant amount. In 2019, the voters of White Bear Lake approved a $326 million referendum, so we are going $130 million plus beyond that. How did we get to this point? In 2015 was the last major building referendum before us. There was a $96 million question that narrowly passed by 5 votes, which led to the new Oltman's Middle School. 52% passage in Woodbury, period. The second question, or the second building question for $46 million for elementary and high schools failed. So 90 million plus approved, 40 million failed. For $46 million for elementary and high school now, the current plan is nearly 80% for elementary and high school, but yet we're up tenfold from that 46 million. Did we have a significant increase in enrollment? Well, at elementary level, we did add nearly 400 students in the 7 years. At the same time, we've added Valley Crossing, and we also converted the old Oltman Middle School to an elementary school, adding 1,300 seats of elementary capacity. So we've added 900 more seats, and we've added students in that time. Middle school, where we spent $96 million, we've only increased by 134 students in 7 years.
Oh.
High school, which is where there has been the most obvious, that's where the growth has been. You're seeing an increase of about 500 students. There was no added capacity there. So there is that's where we're at for crowding is at the high school level. Unfortunately, no, that's where the graduation, that's where that will start to work down over time. So different things you can think about. How do you think about that cost? And the district doesn't want us to break it down in terms of a price for a house per month. You pay $30 a month. Sounds pretty inexpensive. Well, one thing they don't do is to compare to other districts. And so other districts like to compare themselves to South Washington County schools. So this is from last November, I still wanted to do a levy question, looking at voter approved levies. And they can point to 8 other East Metro schools. The second highest was White Bear Lake, which had just approved that largest referendum in state history at $1,080 for a $350,000 house. That's coming in several $100 higher with South Washington County schools. With this new referendum, you'd be about $700 higher than White Bear Lake. Plus, we also approved that the increase in operating expenses last November, and estimated about $175 that we approved for the schools. So in general, we're approaching double what the East Metro has voter approved levies. So that's one of the things, the cumulative effect of these is something to consider. Also, in terms of, a lot of this is talking about meeting a short-term kind of spike in residential construction, but then what they're paying this off is not going to be paid off tomorrow or in a few years. And in their review and comment document they submit to the Minnesota Department of Education, they forecast out to 2057. That's the last year of they'll pay down the bonds gradually, but as you pay them down, the plan is to issue new facility maintenance bonds. So there is no plan to bring the tax rate down after we build. So that is something to keep in mind too. I'll be 79 in 2057. Looking at it from the district is really emphasizing the capacity issue that we got to meet. They're talking about 3,500 new homes, 8,000, was it 8,000 8,000 new homes, 3,500 new students, 15 schools overcrowded. Well, if you're gonna meet that, that's your critical thing that you have to meet. How do you do that in a cost-effective way? And so they're identifying this shortage of space as their number one issue in elementary, middle school, and high schools. I think they're perhaps meeting it slightly better at middle school and high school. I'm not gonna focus on them as much. But at the elementary school level, the cost per seat added is over $200,000. And how do you get that large of a figure? Well, you start subtracting capacity. You close Newport Elementary, there goes 379 students. You close Crestview, you lose about, I think, is it 500-600 students there. So about 1,000 seats lost with those two schools closing. You tear down the existing Pine Hill, you build a brand new Pine Hill next to it that only has 350 seats. You have other improvements. Some of these are, I'm not going to criticize all the improvements, but you're reducing capacity at some other schools with improvements, and then you're adding on, building a new Crestview, a new Pine Hill. So the net effect is you're only adding 926 seats for over $200 million, almost $200 million. And so that is a pretty staggering amount if you're talking just about from a capacity perspective. And for the plan as a whole, when you start factoring the new $23 million district service center, 120 to 660 acres of land acquisition for future schools and other things, this comes to about $130,000 per seat added with this plan. And then get into the issue of the, starting to look to the issue of the, how much is this building that we see going on around us, how is that translating into students? Actually, projecting wise and so forth. So one of the big things is, I've been very critical of the district on some of these measures. I'm not going to go into a lot of details today, but over the last 3 years, we've added 263 students in high schools and had negative growth at middle school of 67, negative 147 at elementary over the last 3 years. So a grand total of 28 students gained in 3 years. And as you've seen, if you head between Woodbury, Cottage Grove, even in Newport, there's been a lot of houses built. Between housing starts in 2018 through 2020, you had over 2,000 housing starts of single family and townhomes. 2,000 housing starts, yet that isn't translating into student growth. 28 students. So there's other factors that are offsetting, or they're not, or people moving into those houses don't have the same number of kids as in the past. That doesn't mean that we're not seeing growth in elementary schools. People are still going to school. Some of you might recognize name a few of these schools that have grown in the last few years. Charters. Woodbury Leadership Academy. It's not, in District 833, but it's part in Woodbury. They increased their enrollment by 48%. St. Ambrose, 34%. Actually, no. New Life Academy, 34% at the elementary level, and St. Ambrose, 11%. So they've had a gain of 279 students at those three schools, while the district has lost 147. So I know school choice is a major question. You can see how it's not buildings that are driving the change, it's people's choices that are driving a lot of the change at the moment. Working my way through this. I've seen some of the homeschool data. I know there was a 50% spike statewide in the COVID. I haven't seen the data recently though, so I'm gonna get scolded here. So, in terms of projections themselves, the district went out and hired a demographic firm, Davis Demographics, to do a nice report. Well, I know the best report back in 2019 using fall 2018 data. And that's nice to know because a lot of what they're projecting on is the same formulas and numbers that are in that report. And now we have 3 years of data to see how well those projections are working. Because when the district's saying 3,500 new students, they're using the exact same things that were used in this report. Back then, they were talking about an increase of over 2,000 students by this point in time. Being driven by new housing developments with the greatest growth in the next 5 years occurring in the elementary level. Particular areas like Bailey, Red Rock, Liberty Ridge, Pine Hill, Gray Cloud were identified as having 90% of the development. That's where we expect to find growth according to this model. What's happened over the last 3 years, rather than 2,000 students, we've had flat enrollment of 28. In those elementary schools, which were supposed to see the most growth, combined, they've actually seen their enrollments go down 67 students. More broadly at the elementary school, again, just in the span of 3 years, the projection's off by 1,000. Within the district themselves, some of their numbers, they have two different, facility planning is interested in projections, but there's also the budget projections too. And it's interesting to see how those two have diverged here recently. In August of 2021, the budget director, I'm not going to name names here, but some of you know who they are, did a projection about, assuming about 1% annual growth out to 2026, 2027. The facility plan comes around in January, giving a presentation to the school board. Their projections for 2026, 27, the exact same year, are almost 2,000 students higher than the budget's forecast. So they're not even in agreement amongst themselves. And again, we're talking relatively, this is 4.5 years from the time these projections were given, a significant difference. So I'm working my way back towards my little home of Newport here. Another issue that has resonated with different people and resonates here in Newport is the size of this school. So what this plan is going to do, how it's going to change the school district fundamentally. And what they're doing is a lot of adding on, going towards bigger schools. There was a debate about whether to add a 4th high school. Instead, they chose to add on all 3 high schools, make a bigger alternative high school, add on to every middle school. And I'm going to focus more on the elementary side of that change. So at the present, the 6 largest elementary schools in the district have an average capacity of 759, with Liberty Ridge at 910, the only school over 800. But if this referendum is approved, the 6 largest schools in the district at the elementary level have an average capacity of 983, an increase of 224. 5 elementary schools will have a capacity greater than Liberty Ridge's present capacity. Liberty Ridge will be 1,129, Crestview 1026, Greycloud 949, Bailey 923, Cottage Grove, where they plan on doing in addition to Sun Newport's kids, 923, and the New Pine Hill 846. So the average capacity of these 6 schools, again, at 1048 is approaching, the 983 is approaching basically the size of a middle school right now. So the current Oldman, they're basically, what they're looking to turn, if you've seen Oldman Middle School, like Cottage Grove, that's what they're looking to have capacity-wise at these 6 largest schools. And so in terms of the current students, you could house, I think it's like 73% of the elementary students could be housed in these 6 these schools at present if you don't have growth. So we can think about the implications. If the enrollment doesn't increase at the elementary level, you're going to have school closures. Other small schools will be closed. They're not going to close the big schools. There'll be other schools that follow down the line. The issues of walkability, busing come to the fore. Whether schools are centers of communities, and that's in Newport, or neighborhoods, will become, again, a much bigger challenge going forward.
Can I ask you a question, because you say that? Isn't that the ultimate goal of Education Minnesota? I mean, they want the schools and the campuses to be the community, the one-stop community for all service to students. Isn't that
what they are right now, or what they're trying to do?
That's what they're trying to take it further.
I'm not knowledgeable on Education Minnesota's, so I'm not going to even attempt to answer that question. Yeah.
Does anybody, some of you ran for, I've seen the endorsement, like they send you an endorsement form. I've never sought their endorsement, but it seems that they want to be the one-stop place to service all of community. And they can't be all things to all people. Sorry, go ahead.
The school I came from is, Lebanon Lanesboro. You can go from daycare to graduate high school in the same building, so it's about as one stop. I miss my cousin Christine is the chair of the school board down there. So, but Newport, where I've lived now for about over 9 years, has had a school in town. It's one of the older communities. Grew up in the river. Had a town the school since 1860. It's never been, it's not the fanciest school, but it's the smallest school in the district and the smallest community in the district. So we've had to fight off school closures many times in the past. So this is not new, but this is a unique challenge in terms of referendum. But for those who don't know about Newport, in recent years, the community has become significantly more diverse, the elementary school even more so. Currently, Newport is the most diverse school in the district by a decent margin, has the most English learners. It has, right alongside Crestview, it also has the largest share of lower income students, those receiving free or reduced lunches. So it's, again, a lot of the western edge schools, whether that's Woodbury, Pullman, Crestview, Armstrong, these are the lower income, more diverse student populations. I'm concerned about how this plan leaves these schools behind. But Newport, I mean, again, it's not a perfect school. Enrollment's been down here in recent years, but I've also heard that the numbers from next year, they're looking like they might be up 15%. So again, there's fluctuations, but the district's highlighting the downward trajectory. They're not going to put that in their notes in the near term. But we do know that we need to improve our enrollment. But what has been achieved at Newport, I think makes it particularly noteworthy, is the achievements at that school. You think that student population, I describe that to you, you might think, well, the test scores are going to be pretty low when it comes to that, to outcomes. And the outcomes, those teachers, they have, it's a Title I school, they have a lot of extra resources, and they use those resources in the classroom. And what does that mean in terms of results? I did a comparison of those peer schools I just talked about, those 4 other schools, including Woodbury, Crestview, Armstrong, Pullman. Which school had the highest MCA scores from 2019 to 2021, average math and reading? Newport. And so they're getting results. And at a broader level, a number that really surprised me is when it came to the pandemic here, that the 2021 reading scores, and that's an area that they particularly pride themselves on, is reading. We all know that the pandemic took a toll on learning. Test scores went down. One school, one of the 16 schools in the district saw its reading scores increase during the pandemic, and that was Newport. And I think that's a sign of the teachers. So Newport, with the second highest rate of free and reduced lunches, had reading scores on par with much more affluent schools such as Gray Cloud, Red Rock, Royal Oaks. Despite having 5 times as many students from lower income families as Middleton, here in Woodbury, Newport's reading proficiency rate was 5 percentage points higher. I want to end on this note here. After a school board workshop, I had a parent, this was like back in March, I believe it was, I had a parent message me stating a school board member said, Newport is not a functional school. When I consider this remark into relation to what is being achieved at Newport Elementary, I'm angered. What greater function does public education have than leveling the playing field? Thank you.